Freedom Free for All. This is the show for views and opinions on topics which, while vitally important, continue to remain untouched by mainstream society.
What are the cost of things? Taxes, credits, carbon credits. Anybody even know what a carbon credit is? They talk about carbon like it's the greatest poison ever invented or something. Now they're building an industry based on carbon. Apparently on account of the IPCC's report. Yeah, the IPCC. It's like Al Gore's little hockey stick scam there. Hey, Al Gore, did you ever hear of the medieval warming period? They'll call you a climate change denier. I'm the climate change denier? It's these guys in the IPCC that are saying the climate never changed. I know the climate always has changed throughout the millennia. The fact is, the IPCC is here to put a tax on life. It hasn't got anything to do with climate change. The real issue is here, they want to tax people on living. You know, like just walking around, leaving footprints. Well, excuse me for leaving a carbon footprint, but a carbon-based life form does that. Think about it. They want to charge you for leaving footprints. Carbon dioxide is not a poison. It's part of the natural cycle. We have been subject to such a barrage of media propaganda, telling us how we have to watch our carbon footprint. We're confusing CO2 with our pollution output. This is a scam.
Hello, and welcome to Freedom Free for All. Recently in Victoria, it was reported that a man was arrested after over 159 guns were stolen from the Island Outfitters retail store. This article, written by the Times columnist, has an obvious agenda. It contained some major contradictions, and in it, Police Sergeant Dean Jansen is quoted as saying, "Access to the long gun registry has been critical to advancing the speed of the investigation." This is then followed by, "All of the guns were registered through the long gun registry." Some police believe that the long gun registry is a valuable tool in tracking and accounting weapons, but not all police. A major question that I have is, why didn't the long gun registry notify anyone? The guns were being registered to someone who improperly purchased, or in other words, stole those guns. The article then says that the police were tipped off by the owner of the store after he did an inventory check and found some glaring errors. The long gun registry is just one of many statutes that the government has created to invade our privacy. The media is constantly used as a mouthpiece for governments and globalists to push an agenda of fear upon us, trying to convince us that it's okay to give up our freedoms and our liberties in the name of safety. And it is not. Criminals rarely commit crimes with long guns, and this statute was used to criminalize the previously lawful behavior of farmers and hunters. In this case, the media is trying to show you that this privacy invading law helped solve this crime. Don't be fooled. The long gun registry had nothing to do with this guy getting caught. It did not catch him registering stolen guns, and it did not locate them. It is not needed. Gun control is for citizens. Criminals will never be dissuaded by licenses or registration. All this law did was spy on gun owners and collect revenue for the federal government. A similar version of the long gun registry was used in Nazi Germany to disarm citizens before the real tyranny could take hold. They want you disarmed. History is filled with stories of citizens obeying gun laws and soldiers obeying orders, thus resulting in massive civilian casualties. Guns in the hands of good people make for a safer nation. This is Josh for Freedom Free for All. Until next time, be safe and be free.
Let's talk about banking. Does anyone know how the Canadian banking system works? What makes the government able to control the nation's money supply? These are questions that everyone asks, but few find real answers. Here's what I've learned to understand about our monetary system. Originally, we had a divergent banking system where privately owned banks such as CIBC and Royal Bank of Canada, and there was no central banking authority. It wasn't until 1935, March 11th, that the central bank took control in Canada after the passing of the legislated Bank of Canada Act. The leader of the Bank of Canada is appointed by the Canadian Cabinet. He serves a 7-year term and can only be dismissed by the government. We have no way of getting rid of the governor except through the intervention of government. This cabinet decides who he is. Only the Minister of Finance can overrule the governor of the bank. This has never happened, but the provisions are there. It's a special type of corporation in that it's owned by the Queen, but it's run in lieu by the government. The Minister of Finance can overrule any act upon the authority of national economic stability. There's a distinction between an ability and a right. The government doesn't have a right to create credit, it has an ability. This is because it's been legislated. There is a difference between the law of legislation and common law. Legal tender laws provide government with the ability to issue credit, not the right. Only 5% of Canada's money is actually representative of real resources, materials, and physical assets. The other 95% is spent into existence by something known as deficit spending through the fractional reserve system. A royal commission in 1933, run by a British propagandist, Lord Hugh Patterson Macmillan, as well as other prominent bankers and politicians, it miraculously discovered that Canada should form a centralized banking system. This is because those who were running the commission had a great deal to gain from it. Fractional reserve banking is the most common system of banking across the planet. Everything from the European nations across even to the Muslim world. Even though in the Muslim countries they have outlawed usury, it is still adopted in a form of fractional reserve banking. For every dollar of cash in the bank's vaults, the banks have conjured up $357 from nothingness, which they've invested or lent with interest. This is an obvious scam. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's also important to note that no fractional system in the past has ever been defeated while the banks were still in power. It required a crash of the economic system. These crashes are also engineered, however, through a series of engineered booms and busts. Bubbles like the housing market, the derivatives, they're used to create bubble economies, and this leads to scarcities in the monetary supply, which then lead to the inevitable monetary gain of the bankers through the fractional reserve system they designed for us. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Adam. I hope you look into the fractional reserve system and the history of banking in Canada. See just how much we're being taken advantage of, how much free rein the government is giving itself on our behalf. Thank you very much.
Our Bank of Canada issues bonds to bankers in New York who then get BA International to print all the money while they charge us interest for something that was never theirs and entirely made out of thin air. To complete this fraud, the banking elites require control involving a control grid. You're being indoctrinated into one right now. New smart meters have been confirmed as non-optional, that is, mandatory. New IDs containing RFID chips are non-optional. To clarify, you have no choice in either matter. This is the foundation for Skynet. a term coined by the US Department of Defense long before the Hollywood movie The Terminator was ever written or filmed. Skynet is the Big Brother Orwellian police state grid that is being brought into existence in order to ensure that you all cooperate with austerity and government-imposed cutbacks. I have here an article from the Times Colonist by Robert Shaw dated January 31st, 2011. From the article, the BC government is paving the way for the all-in-one identity card, found here. The article mentions a 5-year phase-in, starting November of this year. The ID is mandatory, according to this article. If you disagree with the government, the cards can be remotely switched off. The government cares about your privacy, and therefore is producing a study where they will more than likely get carte blanche to destroy the last remnants of your freedom and liberty. According to the Secure Key corporate website, that's the company that makes the cards, securekey.com, this ID card is a contract with the Government of Canada. This is not just for BC, it is for all of you, in every province, all across Canada. This is a nationwide ID tagged with a radio beacon. This article goes on and mentions that the card can be used for banking, e-health, and government services. It ties you into a complete societal control grid. An article from Canada Newswire mentions the use of bank-issued credentials from TD Bank Group, Scotiabank, BMO Financial Group, will enable secure, convenient access to the online government services. They may have forgotten to mention your bank. That's fine. They're all part of the same smart card consortium and RFID consortium. With these cards, they will be able to track everywhere you go. The power elite banking class are behind this. They will know everything you buy. They will use the new smart meters to monitor what electrical devices you use in your home and when. They will know when you are sleeping. They will know what you are watching on TV based on the effect the TV flicker rate has on the power draw. If you are an activist, perhaps they will remotely switch off your card and remove your privilege to purchase the basic human necessities of life. If you don't have the money to buy food, shelter, and water, you can't get it. You die. We are stuck in a system of rampant corruption. Governments historically end in collapse and tyranny. Is this government really that different, and does it really care about you? If you value privacy, if you value freedom and liberty, you will just say no to these RFID cards. You will just say no to these smart meters. And you will stop paying the real terrorists money to fund their criminal banking fraud operation. This relates deeply to the United Nations and their Agenda 21. I contacted BC Hydro and got recorded confirmation that you have no opt-out regarding smart meters. They are mandatory. Not only will you live in increased radiation from radio smog that will be produced by these smart meters and used to turn your RFID tags embedded in your government ID into persistent beacons, you will be migrated onto their new, less free internet, which will over time become the core of the new Orwellian smart grid. I contacted ICBC, who will issue the cards. In a recorded conversation with ICBC, a representative disclosed that the details are secret. However, this is a joint operation with the United States Department of Homeland Security. According to them, it is mandatory. ICBC also tries to deflect questions regarding what frequency these cards operate at. They give you the card but have no clue. They will not provide the specifications and have no ideas about the secret details to be finalized. I will be contacting SecureKey regarding the specifications of the RFID chip in the new ID cards to be issued in November, which are not apparently openly published already. I will be obtaining these specifications with or without a Freedom of Information request. Either way, these cards pose a dangerous threat to our daily lives. They pose a threat on every level for the individual. The disease of globalism is penning you all into an outrageously obvious trap. Wake the hell up. You should be completely outraged at your own dead enslavement. Once on this grid, you will all get to see just how greedy these people are. You will learn just how little of yourself that you will be allowed to actually keep. You will slave away and give your labor for food and rent. You will have your behavior micromanaged. It's time to put these control freaks in their place. The fix is in. Individuals who care will rise up as individuals. Fight for our freedom and fight for the rights of humanity to have hope, love, and opportunity in its future.
Now, don't even get me started on GMOs. A patent on seeds, a patent on life? Since when does anybody have the right to patent life? Have you heard about Percy Schmeiser, for instance? They actually charged him for having Monsanto seeds on his property. I mean, pollination happens everywhere, naturally, all the time, all over the world. And think about it. How do you get plants on a desert island? Did the volcano just erupt seeds with the molten ash? This is an attack on freedom and private property. What kind of a judge in what kind of a country could allow such a Frankensteinish concept in the first place? What sort of a country is it where a man can be liable for seeds that are blowing onto his property? Give your head a shake! As for the GMO issues, well, it's hard to even begin to discuss these issues without frightening people. But unfortunately, we need to be concerned about these issues because they do concern us. Now, there's obviously an organized program to monopolize our food, its distribution and its creation. I mean, seeds blowing onto your neighbor's property. Seriously, people, are we supposed to surround our property with great nets to prevent anybody's seeds from invading us? Unless some big corporation sues us for having their seeds growing on our property? Is this for real? Am I in the real world? Is this a Twilight Zone? It's important to realize that genetically modified foods are not there to feed the world. They're actually there to control the nutrition that we have access to. They're hidden, they're insidiously placed in our products everywhere. When you see farmers being sued by agricultural companies for having stray GMO seeds on their property, it's pretty clear that we have a movement towards a draconian society. We have to bring this to the attention of the people, and people have to bring it to the attention of their fellow citizens. We've got to start networking together. We've got to start working together. We have to breach these subjects that aren't comfortable. Unfortunately, the media that have all the expertise, all the skills to bring this stuff to the attention of the public aren't. Why aren't the professional media handling this? Because they're bought and paid for by the international globalist cartels that are pushing these agendas down our throats.
Greg Hill here with We Are Change Victoria. We are at the University of Victoria on February 23rd. It is a lecture tonight with the Social Sciences and Mathematics Department that is discussing the spin between the media and the justice system. So we're about to go in and listen to 5 presenters and have some questions from the public. Seen some familiar faces here today, which is always nice, and we'll recap after the event. I just had a kind of changing the line of questioning. If we look back at the G20 Summit in Toronto in June of 2010, we look at this either collusion or this massive discrepancy between who's holding who accountable between the police and the media, and who's reporting on which activities. So we see these problems where we see SWAT with essentially high-powered rifles, full SWAT gear, and they're putting people, they're basically blockading people where there's nowhere they can leave a peaceful protest, and they're trapped downtown Toronto. After the government has spent $868 million, almost $1 billion on security, and you see a small group called the Black Bloc, who's notorious for being the instigators of crime in large protests. And you see tens of thousands of peaceful protesters. You see circumstances between when on police vehicles that are left unattended in the line of the mass protest coming underway, almost meant like as it's a target, and the Black Bloc will come in and destroy the vehicle, and all these riot police will literally watch this car get destroyed, buildings get destroyed, businesses get their windows smashed, and they'll let the car burn. And in fact, they let one of those vehicles burn for up to 4 hours. 4 hours. They spent $828 million on security, and they let a police cruiser burn for 4 hours. Yet, the day after, these peaceful protesters, over 1,100 people get arrested under this archaic Public Works Act from the 1930s. And nobody was told ahead of time by the media in the paper that this Public Works Act would allow police officers to incarcerate peaceful citizens. And there was nothing put forward by the police. So is there a huge discrepancy, or is there collusion? And who's going to be held accountable? So I want to know, it wasn't until the Ombudsman of Toronto finally came out and submitted his report that there needed to be a massive investigation. And he put out a report called Caught in the Act.
Who are you suggesting the collusion is between?
Between the media and the police force. But how could that not be? It's a perfect photo op, and the peaceful people, so who's going to be held accountable?
Well, number one, I don't think any of us are intimately familiar with the G20 and what went on, but let me talk about riots and protests in general and how that works for the media. Because opening first Saturday, the Olympics, when all those yahoos were trashing windows, doors and everything else, there were a whole bunch of peaceful people going about their business. We actually, and I think a lot of media that day went and did the story about the yahoos. Yeah, they were the top of the newscast. But we also went and said, hey, there are a lot of people doing okay things. On the night of the riot, we were all doing the riot because the riot just absolutely overwhelmed everything. But we also went and took apart police action and everything afterwards. In Toronto, first of all, there's, and I know Global in Toronto, and I know they were in the middle of it. I know their coverage intimately. I watched the CBC coverage at the time. I'm sure. I think the iconic car burning, frankly, the cops didn't do that. The yahoos did it. And you are going to focus on a burning car. You're saying
the cops let it happen, though.
The cops then said, here's a media thing, guys, go and shoot this and that'll help us.
To justify their $868 million budget.
I don't actually think that the cops on the street think like that.
Well, the cops don't, but you know what? They sure overstepped their bounds.
What the media did was what it should do.
1,100 people incarcerated, and nobody knew ahead of time. It wasn't reported in the media, so who's doing their job? It seems like everybody's doing their job incorrectly.
And probably, but I think there's frankly, I can't defend what went on there. I just say you're not going to see very much collusion between media and
well, this is the spin. Who is spinning whom? Between the media and the justice.
Well, maybe the cops let it spin, but I don't think the media did.
Okay, well, maybe it wasn't you. So we just finished up the evening. I did get the opportunity to ask a question to the panel about the G20 Summit and the possible collusion between the media and the justice system and the police, and how cars were allowed to be set on fire, yet the riot cops did nothing and let the car burn in raging inferno for 4 hours to allow for the perfect media opportunity, and yet never put the car out, and could use this almost as the justification for their $868 million budget that the police force used, and how actually the Public Works Act that was used to arrest peaceful protesters, over 1,100 protesters, in fact, over those few days. There was no information put in any of the media papers. There was no journalist that wrote about the Public Works Act and how peaceful protesters might have to take certain precautions and how they might be incarcerated without due process and having their civil liberties taken away from them or stripped. And there was a huge amount of collusion between the government, our justice system, the police force, and the media, and it was never covered. So I did get a chance to ask a question. They kind of stood there and didn't really have a very good response. So here's to the next one.
This is Freedom Free for All.